Hey, this is Larry Spear. Welcome to our virtual Lunch and Learn today. And we're glad that you're with us. And we're going to talk today, the topic of today, with all the stir going on in the markets and taxes, we're going to talk today about what should I do with my 401k now, today. And so typically, Brian Daly and Larry Spear, I'm the young, good-looking one on the left, or host these things for you. Brian, it was unable to be with us today, and so I'm going to run solo if that's okay. So here's the deal. This is the no opinion zone, and what I'm going to share with you today is just simple scientific, mathematical, and financial facts. So we're going to talk about the 401k. We at least ought to go back and take a quick 30,000 foot view of the history of it. In 1980, a fellow named Tom Benna discovered a loophole in the tax code, and he came up with this idea of allowing employees to put money, save money, pre-tax money, into a retirement plan while receiving an employer match. This was kind of earth-shattering at the time. And what this allowed the companies to do is move away from pension plans, which are called defined benefit plans, to a defined contribution plan. By 1983, 50% of all the large companies had either started or planned to start a 401k. Everybody loved it. The employees loved it because it took the heat off of the pension plan. The employers loved it because it took the pressure off the pension plan. The employees loved it because they got a tax break for deposits going into the account. Now you got to remember, I may be the only one that was alive in 1983 on the call, but the average worker's tax bracket was 35%, plus the employer was contributing to their retirement also. So here's the deal. A few years later, after we've been through two recessions, right? 2003, 2008 really changed the attitude of America and employees about the 401k. And the joke going around in 2008 was that my 401k had become a 201k because of the hit that they took in the marketplace. Obviously, when you make the cover of Time magazine, something's going on pretty big. And their words were, the ugly truth is the 401k is a lousy idea, a financial flaw. And then even the father, Ted Benna, even the father of the 401k, it tells the Wall Street Journal that he helped open the door for Wall Street to make even more money than they were already making. Now, when the creator of something starts to turn against it, you got a pretty good idea that things are not working out correctly. So today I want to talk to you real fast about I want to talk to you about the 401k wealth killers. There's three main ones. There's more than that, but there's three main ones. And the first one is market risk. I don't have to explain market risk to anybody that's alive today that's got money in a 401k. When the pandemic back in January, things looked so rosy. We were on the end of the longest bull run in the history of the company. The stock market was going up, diddy up, diddy up. And then all of a sudden, what they call the black swan event occurred, where something comes out of the blue and impacts the market. And you can see what Warren Buffett warned us about in 2018 when the market was still okay. He says stock market losses of 50% or more are not only possible, but inevitable in the future. No one can tell you when these will happen. And I love this comment. He says the light can go from green to red without pausing at yellow. When the market starts to fall, you can't just put a halt on it. In 2019, again, part of the problem is that these 401ks get in mutual funds, and the mutual funds never perform at the same rate the S&P does. in 2019, an outfit called the Dalbar Report, they are an independent analysis of 401ks in the stock market. They said the typical equity mutual fund investor, that's where most of the 401ks are, has earned only 3.88% annually for the last how many? 20 years. It only beat inflation by 1.7 years. Now think about that. People have had money in an instrument that they're betting on their retirement and they're sweating bullets every time the market tremors, and they only beat inflation by less than 2%. The second wealth killer is taxes. Please pay attention here. We are on the cusp of seeing some of the worst tax rates that we've seen in our country in a very long time. Please pay attention. So a lady named Alicia Munell, who is a part of Boston College's Retirement Research Center, she says it's a really big deal, a very big deal, when people realize that 2/3 to 3/4 of what they thought they had in their tax-deferred retirement account was actually theirs. People watch their accounts grow and they think, wow, all that's money's mine. No. Back when you started putting that money into any of the tax-deferred accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, SEP, 457s, etc., you got you a partner. And that partner is the IRNS. And so that partner says, you put money, we're going to go into business together. You put all the money up, you take all the risk, you manage it day to day, and in 30, 40 years, I'll come to you and tell you what you owe me. Well, that's not such a good deal. I wouldn't go into business with somebody like that, would you? Here's the deal. They still convince you. They still, the myth still goes that you put money into one of these retirement plans, it's pre-tax dollars, which it is, and that you get this ginormous tax deduction. Well, remember, when it was created, the average tax bracket was 35% for the average worker. Today, it's less than 20, right? And so what they don't tell you is you put money into something, you're taking a low tax deduction so that when you go to pay it, you're going to pay it at a much higher rate. What do you think taxes are going to do in our country? Well, if you're paying attention at all to the news, they've got to go up, because we just we've just thrown $3 trillion at the problem, and they want to throw $3 trillion more. Our national debt is now $25 trillion, which is about the same as our annual gross domestic product. I didn't update it for you, so you can go look it up. If you go to usdebtclock.org and you want to get dizzy, go watch this thing spin by. And it's live. I mean, you can see it rolling. This was as of a week or so ago. I mean, this thing's going around faster than your electric meter in Texas in the summertime. We need to know that sooner or later, this chicken is going to come home to roost. Somebody, whether it's us, whether it's your kids or your grandkids, somebody is going to have to pay this bill. The one I want you to see, if I can get the pointer, in 1960, 52% of our debt, the debt to GDP ratio was 52%. In the 80s, it was 35%. Watch what it is today. We're borrowing more than we're making. Now, if you ran your household that way, you'd be bankrupt by now. But the federal government has the ability to print more money, right? But sooner or later, here's what I want you to see. That's going to be us. The national debt problem will become our tax problem. And this is particularly true of pre-tax accounts like the IRA, 401k, 403b, etc. the IRS knows how much money is in qualified plans today. It's about 26 trillion bucks. They know that a third of that money today, in today's tax rates, about a third of that money belongs to them. Can you not feel the pressure of them wanting to start to do something about increasing our tax load? If you want to read a good and interesting book, read The Power of Zero by a fellow named Dave McKnight. And David's just kind of a stand on the wall and holler kind of guy about what's going to happen. And he quotes this fellow that according to the Congressional Budget Office, if Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid go unchanged, the rate of the lowest tax bracket has to go from 10 to 25%, and 25 to 63, and 34. You read it as well as I can. Well, we've never had an 88% tax rate. Yes, we have. Yes, we have. In during World War II, our top tax bracket was in the 90% range. It has happened before. It's going to happen again. And this was way before our debt is now $25 trillion. So just again, I didn't know I had all that fancy stuff. So just understand that if you have money in a taxable account, it's going to be taxed at a much higher level than it is today, because we're at the lowest marginal tax rates we've had in our country in 50 years. So, little side note, if you can get that money out of that taxable account into a non-taxable account, I would consider it. So the other wealth killer, it's a trap, it's fees. Problem with fees is that you can't see them. John Bogle, the guy that created the first mutual fund, he says the miracle of compounding returns is overwhelmed by the tyranny of compounding costs. Now, this is the guy that created the product, right? And so if you got just a minute, I won't bore you by reading all of this thing, but if you put just 1 to 2%, if they're only charging you 1 to 2% to manage your money, got it? 1 to 2%, okay? And so if you got it just shows you that if you got a 401k, $100,000 in a 401k earning 7% over 35 years, watch what happens. If there were no fees, you'd have over $1 million. With a small 1% annual fee, you'd have $750,000. All the way slide over to the 2%. If you're paying a 2% fee on those mutual funds, you've got just about half of what you thought you would have based on what it should be doing for you. Depending on who you listen to, the average mutual fund cost is somewhere around 2.5%, right? Some less, but just kind of an average. So just know that you're making money. Your money that's supposed to be working for you is making as much, if not more money for the guy managing your mutual funds in your 401k than you are. And you're taking the risk. So let me bust up a couple of myths for you. This is always my favorite show. I always like Mythbusters. So let me get a couple of these myths for you about 401ks and IRAs and 403bs. This is a great quote. After decades of being lab rats in the great 401k experiment, most pre-retirees still don't have enough saved. We've run the 401k experiment for 40 years, and we pronounce it a failure. The average 401k in America today is less than $200,000. So, if I can take you now to, there's the bad news. Is there any good news? Well, of course there is. The good news is you don't have to get stuck in a 401k. There are other alternatives to a 401k, and depending on where you are in life and whatnot, then there's some options you should look at. But if you were going to go out and build your perfect retirement plan, what would it consist of? Well, number one, it would guarantee you not to lose money. How about that? It would guarantee not to lose money. Here, when does 30 plus 43 equal 0? Well, if you lose 30% in the stock market today, you're gonna have to increase it. You're gonna have to grow that number to back 43% just so you could break even. We spend all of our time and all of our money trying to recover from these stock market losses. In the last 20 years, in the last 2 decades, the stock market has left its customers hanging 3 different times. The second thing is it's got to be productive. It's still got to grow. If it's not growing, if you go and put money in a CD or a stock or a bank today, it's not growing. And in fact, in our 1% interest environments these days, you're backing up because inflation's growing faster than your money. So it's got to be productive. It's got to be able to grow. It's got to be in place before you retire. Obviously, you can't wait until you get to the last 3 years before you retire. It's got to be tax-free. I think I hit that pretty good for you earlier. If your money's in a taxable account, you're going to lose in today's world 30 to 40%. And then when they have to start jacking up the tax rates, and you know they're gonna, then the more that money that you've got in that account belongs to the IRS and not you. The fifth thing is it's got to produce an income you can't outlive. If you want to have a happy retirement, you've got to have a guaranteed income that's going to cover your minimum living expenses that you cannot outlive. In today's world, the average retiree is going to run out of retirement money 7 to 8 years before they die. That's not good. And of course, it ought to have liquidity. You can control your money. The problem with putting money in your 401k, it's in tax prison, right? You cannot get that money out before 59 and a half and without a 10% penalty, and you pay the tax. Yep, you can borrow it out, but you got to get that money back in there within the next couple of years. And it's just, you've lost the ability to manage your own income. And then number 7, it's got to be self-completing. If you're building a perfect plan, it means that if you start a plan and something happens to you, that you got sick or even die along the way, that the system would complete itself so that your family could enjoy the retirement that you had planned to do. Okay? Those are the components. So I told you we'd make this quick, and I'm talking quicker than Brian Daly did. So basically, if you're on the call and you have some questions about your retirement plan, you get back to the person that invited you to the plan, to the webinar today, and get them to ask them some questions and get them to show you some ways to maybe make this plan better for you. If you're currently in a 401k, there are much better alternatives to your retirement than a 401k. If you're approaching retirement or just beginning retirement and your money is still locked up in a 401k or 403b or whatever, you should at least consider finding ways to move that money into something safer that's not going to lose and is not going to get taxed to death. And you see our little ambulance down there in the bottom. One of the things that we specialize in is the Baby Boomer Retirement Rescue Program. It's never too late. It's never too late to have a better retirement, but you can't keep waiting. So if you're here because you responded to an ad, or you're here because you just showed up because an agent or one of our friends didn't invite you, then and you'd like to have a conversation, that's my personal cell phone number at the top, and there's Mr. Daly's number at the bottom. We'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you and see if we can help you. Now, I told you when we started, this was the no opinion zone. So what I'm about to tell you is my opinion. So far, I've told you all the facts. Here's my opinion. You got to do what you want to do. I've warned you. This is my opinion. If you got money in any taxable account, and if you have the ability to get it out and not get blistered with it, you need to get the money out. That tax sitting there, that tax burden, that tax time bomb that's sitting in those accounts will indeed hurt you long before you ever see it coming.